What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Water Cooler Talk. My name is Caleb Turner, and I'm a sports writer at KSL.com. It is Sunday, June 29th, coming at you with the last episode of the month of June. And you might think, you mentioned we were heading into a slow period of the summer. Not a lot going on, not a lot of sports being played. Maybe even be able to take a break. Well, we have news for you. Actually, a lot of news, a lot of headlines. A lot ended up happening this week. We knew at the very least we were going to get a couple drafts. NBA and NHL had their drafts, so some new players obviously introduced into the state. But that wasn't the half of it. A lot else happened, and a lot just happened today on Sunday. So we've got plenty of news to break down for you. It's just me again, solo pod, running through the headlines, breaking down what you guys need to know about for your water cooler discussions this week. So starting out, this seems like ancient news now, but even before the drafts, before some other interesting things that happened over the weekend, some college recruiting news, BYU football. I mentioned that they had a visit from five-star quarterback Ryder Lyons from California, a top recruit in the country, one of the top quarterbacks in the country. And he made his decision on where he will be attending college. This is a 2026 graduate, so he just finished up his junior year, so he'll be a senior next year, and then he will be attending Brigham Young University, as he announced on the Pat McAfee show on ESPN. So congratulations to BYU, to Ryder on making that decision. He was between several different schools. I know Oregon was certainly a major draw as well for him on the West Coast, possibly USC being a California product as well. He is from Northern California, though. He's from the Sacramento area, I believe. So not quite a SoCal boy. But nonetheless, on his visit to Provo, Kalani Sitake and co. were able to convince him that this was the place for him. And spoiler alert, that wasn't the only BYU quarterback news we got of the week. So stay tuned for more on that front. But a major addition, a major get for BYU. I mentioned it kind of being a little similar to the AJ DeBonsa commitment for BYU basketball. A little different, as AJ was the undisputed number one overall, regardless of position in the country. I believe Ryder Lyons was somewhere in like the 10 to 15 range overall in the country. Top 5 quarterback, though, I believe. And he was the highest rated remaining recruit that had not committed to a college yet in his class. So possibly, he's not going to go number one in the draft, most likely. So not quite the hype as maybe surrounding AJ DeBonsa, who announced his decision on First Take, the other morning, midday ESPN show. So AJ got Stephen A. Smith and Ryder Lyons got Pat McAfee. Just goes to show you where we're at today in the world of sports media. So fascinating stuff happening there. But as we move on, as I mentioned, we did have the drafts. NBA was first last Wednesday with the Jazz taking Ace Bailey at number 5 overall. He was projected to be a top 3 pick almost the entire year, up until just in the last couple weeks. He turned down some workouts that had been scheduled with a couple teams, and teams started to wonder if he had a certain destination in mind, if he was going to be a little picky about where he ended up. And when a team like Utah, who's not a big market, not an LA, not a Lakers, not a Knicks type of draw for a player who you suspect might be looking for that bigger draw. I think some people, started to ask some questions. Maybe it made some eyes widen, some ears open up to figure out, hey, well, this kid seemed very particular about where he was going, and I don't know if Utah was what he had in mind. Nonetheless, he's here. There was some speculation about maybe he would refuse to come to, quote unquote, report to the Jazz for Summer League, for workouts, for introductions, whatever it might be. But those were proved wrong. He flew into Salt Lake yesterday with fellow draft pick Walter Clayton Jr. And they were introduced to press today with the Jazz. And it seems like Ace Bailey wants to be here. So a big get for the Jazz. I think obviously for most of the year, you wouldn't think that he would be available at number 5. But because of some of that speculation, because of maybe some of those workouts that he did not attend, ended up falling from 3 to 5. So the Jazz, despite, quote unquote, losing the lottery, not getting that top 3 pick that they wanted, they end up getting a possible top 3 player. So, ball don't lie. It all evens out in the end, right? And I think there's a lot of hope and potential for what Ace Bailey can bring to Utah. A great player, obviously, like I mentioned, highly rated and recruited out of high school. Played at Rutgers alongside Dylan Harper, who went to my San Antonio Spurs. So I will be following the journeys of these two players very closely, as one is with my favorite team and one is in the team of the city that I live in. So fascinating journey for the former Rutgers Scarlet Knights from New York. So some interesting stuff going on there. Like I mentioned, Jazz did end up picking up another first-round pick. They actually traded up a few spots to get Walter Clayton Jr. from Florida. You might recognize his name from their NCAA tournament run when Florida won the national championship. So the Jazz have a champion on their roster now, officially. So maybe he can show them how to do some winning. First step in getting to a championship is learning how to win, right? And he did a lot of that at Florida. So a lot of people in NBA national media really liked the Jazz selections, their draft, and thought that they were able to do a lot with what they had, which for a lot of fans didn't seem like a lot, but they ended up doing the best with what they had. So that's it for the Jazz draft. But there was another local story in the NBA draft with BYU's Yegor Demin going top 10 as well, number 8 to the Brooklyn Nets. Yegor, obviously originally from Russia, came over to play a year at BYU, came in with a lot of hype, potential top 5 pick at first in this NBA draft, had a few really, really good performances with BYU, obviously showed off his great passing ability for a tall player of his size as well, 6'8", 6'9". He's able to distribute and make some passes that are honestly pretty impressive with what he's able to see from his elevated vantage point. So the Nets liked what they saw in that profile of a tall guy that can pass. The Nets had 5 first-round picks, I believe, and basically took a ball handler, not exactly a point guard, but at least someone that likes to have the ball in their hands at every single one of those 5 picks. So I don't know how that's going to shake out in Brooklyn, but it'll be interesting. It'll be fun to watch at the very least with all these guys that can pass and hopefully shoot the ball as well. I know one of Yegor's knocks was that he didn't have the best shot, but sounds like it was looking really good in workouts before the draft at the combine. And so I think the form is there. His shot looks good, but I think it's just a matter of the consistency and just kind of, knocking him down at the NBA level. So some fun stuff there. Of course, Cooper Flagg went number 1. I already mentioned Dylan Harper at number 2. And then you get those couple local picks right there in the top 10 as well. And later on that same night, Wednesday night, of course, the Utah Mammoth couldn't wait to get a jump on their action, even though their draft wasn't until Friday. They wanted to get involved. They saw some of these trades going on NBA draft night and said, hey, maybe we can get in on some of this action. So Utah Mammoth GM Bill Armstrong called up the Buffalo Sabres and inquired about their forward, J.J. Peterka, a German winger who scores goals. He had a great season this last year. Top 2 on his team, I believe, in points and in goals. And there was rumors about him with his free agency coming up that he might look for a new home outside of Buffalo. Well, Armstrong decided to inquire, and Buffalo did the deal. They sent Peterka to Utah in exchange for Michael Kesselring and Josh Doan, who were both carryovers, obviously, from that Arizona Coyotes team. Some fan favorites. I know a lot of people were a little sad to see Kesselring and Doan go, but as Armstrong told us in a press conference after this trade, sacrifices have to be made. It's just kind of how this business works. To get something, you have to give up something. So that was the trade that went down. We have yet to talk to JJ. He is German, like I mentioned. I believe he's in Germany for the summer. So excited to see how he fits in with this Mammoth group, who I will get into a little bit more here as we get into their draft. But, you think about guys like Dylan Guenther, who scored a ton of goals for the Mammoth this year, for the Utah Hockey Club as it was when he scored them. Logan Cooley, Clayton Keller. So adding another dangerous goal scorer who can just, hopefully put some pressure on defenses and make this Mammoth team just a little bit more dangerous in that attack going forward. Should be fun to watch. And he's also pretty young. I think he's only 23 still. So he kind of fits that similar timeline to Guenther and Cooley in their early 20s. Because Bill Armstrong has said that, their timeline, it's looking like it's going to be about 5 years from now when the core of his team is hitting their primes, and he believes will be their, championship window, as it were. He mentioned that teams that have won the Stanley Cup recently have their best players are in that range. They're in that 28, 29 year range. And Utah, they do have some players in that range, but they're certainly not their best players. And so I think he's looking at these young guys that they've taken high in the draft and thinks, hey, if we can get them, build around them so that when they hit that point in their prime, in their late 20s, that we can be ready to roll, make some Stanley Cup runs, and maybe bring a cup home to Utah. Wouldn't that be exciting? So looking obviously down the road quite a bit there, long-term vision. But I think it's safe to say that JJ Peterka fits with that timeline. So nice to see there. And moving on to their draft, as I mentioned, Friday was when the NHL draft started with the first round. And the Mammoth had a high pick. They had the number 4 pick after jumping up from number 14 to number 4 in the draft lottery. And Armstrong talked a lot about, we want to take a swing with this pick. There were discussions about, hey, would they maybe trade this pick if they're looking for a more win now player? Well, as I just discussed, they're not, they know when their window is, and it's not exactly right now. So they're still planning for the future. Utah's picking for the future right now. But with this pick, with having a top 5 pick, they didn't want to pick somebody that would end up being a backup, or as he described it, a third line guy, which essentially means not necessarily third string, but they're not starting the game. And so he wanted to get somebody that could, eventually be starting caliber, first or second line, as they say. And they ended up going with a player from Canada, Quebec, Caleb Denoyer. He said his name in French for us today, and it's a little different. I probably just shouldn't even attempt it because I'll probably butcher it. But hey, shout out. His name is Caleb. We've got another Caleb here in this market now, on the team that I cover now too, on the Mammoth, on the hockey team. So he's really fun. We got to talk to him today. He finally he got into town on Sunday as the Mammoth have their development camp, kind of similar to an NBA summer league where it's all young players. We don't bring in most of the established older players, and so they bring in draft picks from this year, from also previous years. So for those of you that recognize, the first ever pick from Utah was Tija Ginla last year. He is here. He'll be participating in some capacity in that camp. He did have double hip surgery at the beginning of this year, so not totally sure to what extent he'll be participating in this camp, but he is here. He's present, along with several other players that the Mammoth have drafted over the last few years. So, like I mentioned, it takes a bit longer for hockey players to get to the big leagues as opposed to NBA. So this is another important step for those guys as they get integrated. Get to spend some time in Utah. They'll be up in Park City for most of it. So get to take in some of the mountain views, and they all comment on the mountains, as everyone should. I think those of us who live here maybe take it for granted, but when you fly and you step out for the first time, you look up and you're like, hey, that's not what it always looks like when I look up at the horizon. There's not always these giant mammoths, if you will, towering over me. So they all comment on it. It's cool. It's a cool feature, right? It might not look as cool right now without the snow. But they're still there, and it makes our city beautiful. They always comment it's beautiful, it's gorgeous. That's what Caleb Denoye said. So he also said the city is clean. So shout out to Salt Lake for putting on a clean vibe for the new draft pick. He was their lone pick in that first round. The draft extended into Saturday with rounds 2 through 7. If you want a recap of those players, you can head to ksl.com to check out the list that I made of 6 other players that were taken in those latter rounds. Most of those players, to put it frankly, will not end up playing for the Mammoth. A couple will. I went back and looked just out of curiosity, like how many 4th, 5th, 6th round players end up playing in the NHL. It's probably more than you would think, but it's still, there might be, let's say a team picks 7 players in all 7 rounds each year. It might be like 1 player out of rounds 3 through 7 each year that breaks through. So it certainly won't be all 7 players. So it's probably not totally worth it to go through all those names. But if you are curious, go ahead and check it out. I think they were entirely international players. Players from Czechia, from Russia, or from Belarus, from Finland, Switzerland. So a lot of interesting stuff there. And if you're interested in international hockey or hockey prospects, feel free to check that out. But this is kind of where we start to get into some of the interesting stuff. Last recap I'll give you guys real quick before some of the most recent headlines. RSL, they did play a game last night. One of our few teams currently still in action. Johnny Russell scored a goal. It was his first time being back in Kansas City. So RSL traveling to Kansas City, a rival of theirs for many, many years, had just recently signed a player from Kansas City, Johnny Russell. He's Scottish. He was their captain for several years. Well, he goes back for the first time to Kansas City last night and scores the only goal of the night for RSL. They end up tying 1-1 against Kansas City. But it was a fun game. I know a lot of people complain about ties in soccer. Shouldn't have a game end in a tie. Well, there were still goals scored. At least it wasn't a 0-0 tie. And at least RSL's not losing. They lost 4 games in May. They only played 2 games in June, but didn't lose any of them. 1 win, 1 draw. So some improvement. Any improvement is good improvement, right? So things looking up. RSL 4 home games in the month of July. So if you are looking to catch RSL as they look to climb out of this hole that they've been in, back into playoff contention, July is your time. 4 home games. So feel free to check those out. And now we get into what ended up being a much more exciting Sunday than I anticipated. I'm trying to figure out exactly what the order of this was, but I think it started out with a Jazz trade. It was news broke Sunday afternoon. I've got 5:45 p.m. here, but it's probably maybe a little earlier than that. The Jazz trading Colin Sexton to the Charlotte Hornets for Yusuf Nurkic. So guard for big man. The Jazz in return get the 30-year-old Nurkic, who's been around. You've probably heard his name. Nuggets, Trailblazers, Suns, then with Charlotte. He's been around. Solid big man. I mean, I think he actually had one of the only 5x5s, as they're called, when you have 5 of 5 stats. So like 5 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 5 blocks, 5 steals. There aren't a lot of those games, and I think Nurkic actually had one of those within like the last 7 to 8 years maybe. And then Wemby had one of those last year against the Jazz, so you might be familiar with it because of that reason. Anyway, all that to say that Nurkic, he's solid. He's got some skills. He can kind of do a little bit of everything. he's not great at any one thing. He's not going to block shots like Walker Kessler probably, or he might not pass like Nikola Jokic. But he can do a lot. He's been around the league for a long time. If you want him to kind of be a mentor to some of your younger bigs like Taylor Hendricks or even like Walker Kessler to an extent, he could be helpful in that sense. It's yet to be seen, however, if Nurkic will be sticking around Utah. Free agency starts on Tuesday, July 1st, so there will be a lot of movement going on throughout the NBA over the next few days. We saw it on Sunday night, not only with the Jazz, but with a couple other teams as well, whether it be signing contracts or buying players out or trading. So it's entirely possible that this is just another step on the road for Nurkic, and he may be going somewhere else. But I'm sure a lot of fans sad to see Colin Sexton go. Obviously a player that played hard every game he was in, and unfortunately, I guess that was unfortunate for the Jazz sometimes in games they were trying to lose. You feel for a player like him who's kind of entering his prime, like Lauri Markkanen in that late 20s range. You don't want them to have to be on a losing team for too long. And for the 3 years that Colin Sexton was here, the Jazz basically just did that. They did a lot of losing. So we'll see if it gets much better when he goes to Charlotte. I can't guarantee it. But he'll have an all-star type player in LaMelo Ball, a rising star potentially with Brandon Miller. So hopefully that works out for Colin. And we'll see if this is it for the Jazz. As I mentioned, free agency coming up. Obviously, there's rumors about Lauri Markkanen, about Walker Kessler, to see if they might be moved as well. Jordan Clarkson, who knows? So certainly will be interesting to see over these next couple days if this is the only action or if this is simply the first domino of a lot of other things to come in what I've said could be a pretty busy offseason for the Utah Jazz. As Austin Ainge, their new director, leader, has said, you won't see tanking this year. So whatever that means, I'd imagine that there will be some tweaks and changes to make sure that happens. Whether that means moving players out or moving players in, I'm not sure. But first domino, there you go. Colin Sexton to Charlotte for Jusuf Nurkic. And the Jazz also sent out a draft pick. I believe it was a second-round draft pick as part of that trade as well. So a lot of people commenting on the kind of perceived low value of Colin Sexton on the trade market if you had to include a pick as well. He's only 26, so you would think that he would have positive trade value. So it is looking a little shady to some people, and we will see if more comes out about that. Before I get into the final note, I'll just touch on. Actually, we'll do this one first. So soon after that trade dropped, news started to come out about Jake Retzlaff, the BYU quarterback. He released a comment earlier this week via his lawyer about the lawsuit that he is currently involved in about alleged sexual assault, and the lawyer statement said that everything was consensual, but in that also admitted to there being some kind of sexual relationship with this woman, the plaintiff in this case. And so that obviously led people to think, well, okay, it might not be a legal situation, but with it being BYU, you do have to account for the honor code with players signing and saying that they will not participate in premarital sex while at BYU. So clearly that had been broken in some way by the quarterback, Jake Retzlaff. And it was reported on Sunday that Retzlaff would be facing a suspension due to that honor code violation. The number that was reported was 7 games. And for that reason, Retzlaff would be entering the transfer portal, leaving BYU and going somewhere else because he didn't like that suspension, I guess, or he wanted to play and didn't want to have to spend a year with several games on the bench for BYU. So BYU will have a new quarterback this fall. Who that is will be is yet to be seen. I believe our BYU guy Sean Walker had a poll up on his Twitter account. If you want to go check that out, vote for it. feel free. I'm curious to see what those results end up being as far as predicting who will be the BYU quarterback this season. But yeah, obviously major news there with as good as BYU was last year. 11-3, I think, was their record. So, they were knocking on the door of Big 12 championship, potentially. Ended up going to the Alamo Bowl, played a really, really good Colorado team with the, Heisman winner on their team and beat them. So major change there for BYU. And this is kind of just the first, and once again, kind of a first domino, right, to fall in what will be also a season of change for BYU heading into their training camp in August. We'll end on some good news here, a more positive note. Diego Luna, the RSL star, he learned that he would be an MLS All-Star for the second year in a row earlier this year, and he followed that up with his first goal for the U.S. men's national team in the Gold Cup quarterfinal against Costa Rica. U.S. ended up tying that game 2-2 in regulation, went to penalty kicks, and won it. Diego was subbed out before penalty kicks, unfortunately, so did not get to participate. But the goalkeeper, Matt Freese, came up with with 3 really big saves for the U.S., and so they will be moving on to the semifinals of the Gold Cup to face Guatemala on Wednesday. So big moment there for Diego. He seemed really happy about it. It's taken him 10 games to get that first goal for the national team. He thought he had one a couple of games ago against Trinidad and Tobago, but it took a deflection off a teammate, so that teammate ended up getting the credit for the goal. So you could just tell kind of the relief and the emotion coming off of Diego in that moment. Let out a big "Vamos!" After he scored it, because it was a big moment too. U.S. was down 1-0 at that time after a penalty by Costa Rica. And so just before halftime, Diego gets that goal, which also deflected off somebody, but luckily it was a defender, so he got credit for it. And ties it 1-1. U.S. takes a 2-1 lead briefly in the second half, and then it ends up being 2-2, like I mentioned, going to penalties. But they're moving on, so another chance for Diego to prove himself on Wednesday against Guatemala in a semifinal game. And more chances for him to gain favor with fans, which obviously he's already a fan favorite with just the way he plays, scoring goals, getting assists, showing just some extra passion, I guess you could say, in the way he plays. And it's something that fans appreciate with a national team that at times can seem a little apathetic, especially right now with so many players choosing to skip the Gold Cup. I think seeing a player like Diego show up, kind of just take the opportunity by the reins and go for it, I think is really refreshing. So shout out to Diego Luna. He'll be rejoining RSL here shortly in a couple weeks, looking like the July 12th home game against the Houston Dynamo. So if you're looking to see Diego, put that one on your calendar. And then, like I mentioned, he'll be playing in the MLS All-Star game a couple weeks after that in Austin. So some big opportunities coming up for him. I've mentioned on this podcast that there's speculation that he might be moved during this summer and what is the off season for the European teams. He might go to a bigger club in Europe, but there have not been any rumors that I've seen this summer. As we kind of get into the heat of it, I mean, teams start their preparations for their seasons in late July, early August. So I believe the deadline is in mid-August for most European teams. So we're not quite there, but we're getting into the time where you start to see some rumors. In fact, there's even been rumors about another RSL player, Xavier Gozo, 18-year-old kid from Utah, but nothing about Diego yet. So I don't know if he's changed kind of his outgoing message saying, I actually want to stay in Utah, stay in MLS. Obviously, he's got a son here now. He has a lot of family in nearby California. So I don't know. Hopefully we get a chance to maybe ask Diego about that and see if his long-term aspirations have changed. A lot of national team players want to play in Europe. The perceived It's not perceived. It is a higher level of play in most European leagues. You look at guys like Christian Pulisic, Weston McKennie that play in Europe, and I think Diego, in his mind, wanting to get to that point at some point. But maybe now, with seeing those European players not show up for the men's national team, having several more MLS players show up, and kind of have to gut out some of these wins and prove themselves as a bit of an underdog story, maybe it's kind of turning the tide, and we'll make a guy like Diego, who is kind of felt like an underdog, I think, his entire life, has had to fight for a lot. Maybe that resonates with him. Maybe it resonates that he wants to be part of a league that is a little more scrappy, that has to fight for things. Obviously, we know that RSL is known for their dog type mentality, their scrappy, clawing their way back into games type mentality. So certainly that's something that I think we see in Diego, and whether he wants to be part of that long term, I think it has yet to be seen. But man, if he were to just say, hey, I'm just sticking around Utah, I think, man, that would take fan appreciation up to a level you don't see very often, if at all, among American soccer stars. So some interesting weeks and months ahead for Diego Luna to see what he decides to do. And we'll get to see it right here in our backyard in Sandy. So very exciting stuff. Like I mentioned, man, a way busier week than I thought it would be. I thought we were kind of heading into those doldrums. But man, these teams had other ideas. The news cycle had other ideas. And I hope it wasn't too jumbled. Hope you guys were able to get something out of that. And if you have any follow-up questions on any of these storylines, please feel free to hit my line. I'm on Twitter 24/7 at CalebTurner23. And we'll be seeing you guys next week.